Here.
Councilmember Myers.
Here.
Councilmember Streetman.
Here.
Councilmember Bogosian.
Here.
Councilmember Ward.
Here.
Councilmember Pierce.
Here.
Councilmember Carroll.
Here.
Councilmember Miller.
Here.
Mayor Pounds.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Council will hear a bid protest to council's decision to award a construction contract to Bastion Group LLC for completion of the Waterway Boulevard Flood Barrier Project. Procedure for this hearing will be staff is allowed 15 minutes to present its reason for award to council. Staff is not required to use all of those 15 minutes. Protester will then have 15 minutes to rebut staff's reasons for the award. Protester is also not required to use all 15 minutes. Staff is allowed 5 minutes to reply to protester's rebuttal. Staff is not required or reply to use all 15 minutes. Protester is allowed 5 minutes to rebut staff's reply. Protester is not required to reply or to use all 5 minutes. There will be no testimony taken from anyone, either through direct or cross-examination. However, council will have the opportunity, but is not required, to ask the protester or staff questions. These questions will not count against presentation times allowed. So first, we'll designate a timekeeper. Nicole, if you don't mind doing that, and maybe a 1 or 2 minute warning if someone gets close to the time. So first item, we will go, who on staff will be presenting its reasons for award to Bastion Group LLC?
I will, Mayor. Douglas Carr, City Administrator. I'll be presenting for the city. I also have here Rick Karkowski with Thomas & Hutton. He was the project engineer on prior projects for us.
Thank you, Douglas. So if you're ready, we will start the time when you're good.
Ready? Okay, thank you, Mayor. I am going to fairly quickly go through what has already been provided to council. You all were sent a memo dated 12/31/25. You also received an email from myself and Rick Karkowski with that same date, 12/31/2025. And then we had discussion, open discussion at your last council meeting where this bid was awarded to the Bastion Group. All of this information has already been provided to you, but I'll kind of summarize it here again for you today. The issue that we had with the bid itself that was presented is that QE left, if you looked at the granular detail of the bid amounts, there clearly were placeholder amounts in there that didn't amount to going out, doing due diligence, getting bids back from subcontractors or properly bidding the job for pricing, we believe. That was a problem that we had in the bid. But quite frankly, the primary issue that we have had with QE is our prior experience. And I would like to and I'll go through some of our experience that we've had in the past. And I would also direct your attention to section 1-10-5, subsection C12, and that is on page 6 of your packet. And that talks about awarding a contract. And contracts shall be awarded to the lowest responsible bidder. That is not the lowest overall bidder, but the lowest responsible bidder. There are then 10 different criteria that the city should look to in determining the lowest responsible bidder. Number 1, the ability, capacity, and skill of the bidder to perform the contract or provide the service required. Number 2, whether the bidder can perform the contract or provide the service promptly or within the time specified, without delay or interference. Number 3, the character, integrity, reputation, judgment, experience, and efficiency of the bidder. Number 4, quality of performance of previous contracts or services. Those are in our code as considerations that we should be looking at. I will go through just a kind of a quick synopsis of our prior experience with QE. They did outfall projects for us at 30th Avenue and Forest Trail, 2 major outfalls. Those jobs were significantly delayed. We had a bid opening for that work, or we were requested bids for that work in August of 2021. We still have not fully completed those projects. We have pending litigation with those projects today. We had a 2025 settlement that most of you were on council at the time that we considered those settlements. So that was well after the bid opening. That last job involved the substitution of materials that the city did not want to accept. The bid specifications called for the use of a certain brand of valves. Those valves are WAPRO brand. After a lot of probably several months of back and forth, we eventually, really to help get the project over the finish line, we reluctantly but eventually did agree to using a lesser product. That was a savings of approximately $140,000 to that contractor. Again, we were trying to be a good partner, spent significant time on that consideration, and ultimately agreed to it. There were, on that project, over $530,000 of change orders requested to the city. That's obviously, that's in addition to the $140,000 credit that we did not seek for the change in materials. There was 2 legal actions that resulted as a product of those outfall projects. One directly with QE on a change order request, a separate one with an adjacent property owner that's still pending with us now. The kind of in addition to and if you were to kind of aggregate all of the requests and liabilities kind of still open to the city and paid by the city, it is approaching $1.4 million in additional claims that came from that project. That excludes hundreds of hours of legal time and expense that the city incurred. It excludes hundreds of hours of engineering time to look through the substitutions, the change orders, all of the documentation, and hundreds of hours of staff time. So to say that it was a bad experience, I would say, is a gross understatement. And for those reasons, we deem them to not be a responsible bidder. Questions now or questioned? And I do have, Rick, if there are detailed questions on any part of that. We do that now?
Let's do
We that?
questions now. Yeah. Questions of staff?
And this is not part of 15, is that
Correct.
I just got a question about, it's in the letter from QE, it's talked about the statement of reasons explaining why it was elected to bypass QE's low bid in favor of the high bidder. It was not provided. Is that true, or is that, did we provide anything?
It was provided, the memo was provided to QE. And I will just, again, a kind of an issue that we've had is part of our settlement agreement was a non-disclosure about our settlement. So we have executed a non-disclosure about the settlement, so I'm not free to kind of speak about that. So portions of what I have kind of put in the packet, put in the public-facing agenda, have been withheld intentionally to honor that that non-disclosure agreement as part of that settlement. So they have been provided with the documentation itemizing why they're not responsible.
Rusty.
Thanks. Douglas, you mentioned that the outfalls at 30th and Forest Trail were significantly delayed and still not completed.
Well,
What
we
were
still
the-
have, the work itself is completed, but we still have ongoing litigation.
Okay, what were the circumstances around the delays?
You know, and there was a myriad of issues. There, the bulk of, there were a handful of things going on. One is that the project was not getting complete in enough time to avoid the busy season. So we intentionally called for pauses during the summer months to not have the project impact the public. So that was one of the reasons for delay. There was a fairly consistent and constant kind of back and forth between Thomas and Hutton, the engineer on the project, and QE in terms of the project was a designated design. So a large part of the design of the details of that project, the onus of handling that design was designated to the contractor and his subcontractors. That portion of the project was a real challenge for QE. They, you know, there was a lot of placing blame on their subcontractor. They had to have large boxes manufactured. They kind of would come back to the city and say, our subcontractor can't design this, can't. So they had design problems with their subcontractors throughout the entire process.
So some of the pause during the high season or whatever was due to delays or items that they brought up that they couldn't get done.
That's
that we
correct.
kept trying to
That's correct.
get corrected.
Yeah, and it was, that was a time that some delays were not that unusual. There were, you know, there was kind of the whiplash of COVID, factories being closed down. It was well after that. I will say that every other subcontractor or drainage contractor we've had near to that time frame had none of these issues, but QE seemed to constantly struggle with supply chain issues.
Similarly, what was the nature of the change orders?
And I will say, of the, say, 500, and I think it was 530,000 requested, 370 of them were awarded. So we felt like they were awarded, or they were part of a settlement that we didn't want to award, but we did ultimately. But some of those were legitimate, you know, things that just popped up during construction, some portion of those. I would say that, Rick, you have a recollection of the major legitimate change orders that?
No, I don't, but I do remember like there was.
Rick, you need to talk.
And I guess I'm not looking for anything like specific, but things that we would have expected to have been recognized during the original bid and not become a change order, or do we feel like, you know, these were truly things that came up were surprises that we wouldn't have expected them to know about it?
I would say they were, at least the one I have in mind was not a, you know, in my opinion, it could have been recognized at bid. There was we didn't include a line item for a specific type of pipe. That, you know, that was on the second structure that they didn't get to till 2 years down the line, and that's when that change order came up. That, you know, there's a blanket statement that says you need to be looking at these plans, and if you see any discrepancies at bid, bring it to us. So that should have said, where should I put that? You know, so everybody else would have just lumped that into some other line item. But, you know, again, since it wasn't there, you don't have the ability to kind of correct them. But, yeah, that's one that comes to mind.
And I got one other question, Phil. I don't
Go
want to
ahead.
hog it, but-
Go ahead.
Am I understanding, though, that in this bid, we requested a specific kind of a valve? Is that what you were referencing?
That is in
this
the
one?
prior work.
In the prior, not in this one, though?
That's correct.
Okay, got it.
That is correct.
Got it. All right.
Other questions for staff? Thank you, Douglas. Who is representing the protest on the part of the protester? And if you will state your name and association with Quality Enterprises USA, Inc.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'm James Weatherholtz. I represent Quality Enterprises, and I'll be presenting on their behalf this afternoon.
Thank you. Are you ready to go?
Yes, sir, I'm
Okay.
ready.
Nicole, we'll start timing.
So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for setting aside the time to hear this protest. I have a very short PowerPoint presentation that will cover most of the points that I want to talk about today. Just as a little bit of background, Quality Enterprises submitted its bid on the current project in the amount of about $2.5 million. The city, after determining that Quality Enterprise was the low bidder, elected to award the project to the Bastion Group. Bastion Group's bid was $2.8 million, so almost $300,000 more than Quality Enterprises' bid. Under the purchasing procedures, which are very similar to the federal regulations and the state procurement code, the city is obligated to award it to the lowest responsible bidder. So the only way that the city could avoid awarding this project to Quality Enterprises would be to deem them non-responsible. So that's what happened in this case, and I understand that I'm preaching to the choir here and giving you history that you experienced yourselves, but I think it's important to walk back through that to put it in context of why we're here today. So the purchasing procedures require that when the award is not given to the lowest bidder, the contracting officer has to prepare a full and complete statement of the reasons. And Mr. Bogosian, I think, asked the question, or maybe it was Mr. Streetman, about whether or not we had received a copy of that. At the time we submitted the bid protest letter, we had not seen that statement. I did receive a copy of the statement Thursday, I think, of last week. I have had an opportunity to review that. I heard Mr. Kerr say that some of the materials that were presented as part of the agenda weren't that not everything was presented as part of the agenda, but I just want to make sure that the packet that I received did include all of the materials that the council would consider. And we don't have to answer that question now, but a point of clarification, just want to be sure that I'm looking at the same things you're looking at. So I have seen a copy of the statement at this point, and when you look at the statement that was provided, I think ultimately what it shows is that the grounds for determining QE as non-responsible were basically this prior claim on the first project that QE performed. And I'm talking specifically about this email dated December 31st. In the packet, Mr. Kerr forwarded a series of emails where there was discussion with the engineer on the prior project, Thomas and Hutton, about those claims and that prior performance. I realize that this is too much text for you to read, so I broke it out into two sections, and this is the first half of that email. And because these are the grounds for determining QE to be non-responsible, I just want to touch on each of the ones that I think are material for consideration. The first is that they call out the fact that water and sewer utilities appear to be a major cost differential. This actually was a topic of discussion at the city council meeting when this issue was presented. I think one of the reasons that Mr. Kerr and Thomas and Hutton found that some of these were round numbers is that Quality Enterprises self-performs a lot of its utility work. They are a pre-qualified, pre-selected contractor for utility work, and so they self-perform that work. It's one of the reasons that they can offer bids that are lower than companies like the Bastion Group and the others that submitted bids here. So that's not a basis and shouldn't be a basis for disqualifying them. I heard at the beginning of Mr. Kerr's presentation some mention of whether or not those rounded numbers would be a basis to disqualify them. If the city was going to do that, it would have to deem the bid non-responsive. It's clear from the documentation that the decision wasn't based on responsiveness, it was based on responsibility. So I think that for purposes of this bid protest and a future appeal, the issue really that we would be looking at is responsibility. And so these next three items go to responsibility. The first is, we've already talked a little bit about this material product substitution. So it's true. This project was specified to be these way-stop check valves. Quality Enterprises, when it prepared its bid, it priced the red valve, a different manufacturer of a similar check valve. It came to Thomas & Hutton and the city and said, we made a mistake. We priced it using red valves. We didn't price it using the way stop. I think there may have been some sole source selection in this particular project. I'm not aware of that. But they came to the city and said, we'd like to switch these out. They understood that if the city said no, they would have to use the way stop valves and pay for that out of pocket because they submitted a bid and they would be held to that. As Mr. Kerr mentioned, there was back and forth between the engineer and the city. Ultimately, the city agreed to allow that substitution. So to say that they made more money on the project because of this change, the truth is that they just didn't lose money, right? Their bid didn't price the higher priced way stop valves. So the fact that the city and the engineer were willing to let them switch those out just means that they didn't lose the money that they would have lost had they had to provide the way stop valves. Change orders 1 through 6, $122,000. There were some other change orders that were approved. I'm not aware of any dispute about those change orders. I don't think that submitting change orders that are approved or are not disputed would be a basis to determine a bidding contractor non-responsible. So then we would shift our focus to this change order number 9. And in your questions of Mr. Kerr, I think we got at what I think is the heart of the issue for discussion today, because it was the basis of the claim on the prior project. There were these junction boxes that were drawn by Thomas & Hutton and included in the contract and were required to be built as drawn. When Quality Enterprises went to its supplier to order these precast junction boxes, they were just too big. They were too big to ship. They were too heavy. They were too wide to get across the causeway. They were too large to be handled by the cranes that you would use to install components like that on a project like this. Quality Enterprises went to the engineer and said, the way that you have drawn and designed these boxes to be precast, it cannot be done. They're too big. They requested Thomas & Hutton to issue drawings with rebar that showed cast-in-place junction boxes. That allows the contractor to, instead of ordering a precast product, to build that product in the field, but they need certain additional information from the design engineer in order to be able to do that. That is what drove the cost changes on this project, and that was predominantly what drove the delays. I won't try to describe all of the correspondence back and forth between the parties about that issue, but there was a long period of time where Thomas & Hutton was refusing to redesign, to offer the rebar details, to assist the contractor in getting them what they needed to do this cast-in-place method in lieu of these precast junction boxes. Our position is that that is what drove the change orders on this project. That's what drove the litigation. That's what drove ultimately the settlement. I agree with Mr. Kerr. There is a settlement agreement based on that, the resolution of that litigation that has a confidentiality provision. The amounts that were paid, who paid, what amounts as part of that settlement, I think are relevant considerations for council. I'm sure that you have a copy of the settlement agreement itself that you can take a look at in executive session. I have a copy with me today if you need it. But ultimately, this was not a frivolous claim, right? This was not a claim that was made to drive up the cost or to increase the contractor's profit on this project. This was a good faith dispute, and at times probably a heated dispute between a contractor and an engineer about whether the design that was provided by the engineer was adequate for the contractor to build. There's a comparison in the second half of Mr. Karkowski's email where he's making a recommendation to the city about responsibility that compares this project to other projects. And I would say that is not a fair comparison. Those are apples to apples. I mean, some projects have claims, some projects have change orders, some don't. Every now and then you get a project that has what we would consider to be a pretty significant design error, and it just has to be addressed. And that's what Quality Enterprises did here. I think it's fair for contractors to make claims and submit change orders when they have design issues that need to be addressed. And if by doing that, you're going to be deemed non-responsible by municipalities on projects going forward, I mean, in effect, what Thomas and Hutton and the city are telling Quality Enterprises now is, you made claims on a prior project about an issue that we didn't agree with. It caused delays. It caused us to incur significant additional costs. And as a result, we're not going to let you do any of our work or bid on any of our projects going forward. That is essentially what this determination of non-responsibility is doing to Quality Enterprises. And I would say, if a municipality is going to do that, you have to be very specific in your statement and in your explanation of exactly why they don't meet those 10 criteria that Mr. Kerr talked about. That information is not contained in this statement of reasons why they were determined non-responsible. And I would say that the standard will be that it has to be rational, right? Those decisions have to be based on support, and it can't be based on the fact that the parties had a good faith dispute about changes. This is all information that was in my letter. I just want to reiterate, when we're talking about responsibility, right? The code, the procurement code and the federal regulations, they're talking about a contractor that's capable of performing the contract requirements. When you look at those list of 10 things in the Isle of Palms procurement procedures, they talk about the financial backing to do it, the skill, the expertise, insurance, licensing, demonstrated success on prior projects. Quality Enterprises has been in business for 55 years. They have a great reputation in the industry. They have performed countless projects, just like this one, on time and under budget. There were issues on the project that it performed for the city of Isle of Palms in the past, but that is not a reflection of who Quality Enterprises is. And I would submit to council that if the city is going to determine a contractor to be non-responsible, they have to do it based on more than their experience on one project. I don't know whether the city called references, spoke to other owners, spoke to other municipalities, tried to figure out what is their reputation and their success on other projects, but all of those things are relevant and should be considered. And then ultimately, to withstand review and to successfully deem Quality Enterprises to be non-responsible, and for this to hold up on appeal, I think that the city ultimately is going to have to show that there was a rational basis for doing it, that it wasn't arbitrary, that it wasn't capricious, that there were good faith reasons for telling a contractor that we're not going to accept your bid. And I would submit to council that under the circumstances we have here, that this situation just doesn't qualify. Thank you. So with 2 minutes left, I will wrap it up very quickly, and I will just say conceptually, big picture, the procurement code is designed to encourage competition, to keep as many contractors as possible in the pool so that cities like the Isle of Palms get the work done at the best price possible. The final thing I'll note is if you look at this slide, if you look at the slide where there's a discussion of the prior project and all of the claims, Quality Enterprises bid that prior project at $2.2 million. The next low bidder was $3 million. That's a $750,000 difference, even if you add up all of these claims that were paid. The city still came out ahead and paid less money than it would have paid if Gulfstream had done the work there. I will say that I'm not familiar with this lingering claim by an adjacent property owner that Mr. Kerr mentioned. I think that he was implying that that's related to Quality Enterprises and that they should be responsible for those additional costs. I can't address that because I'm not aware of a claim by the city that that's Quality Enterprises' fault, but if that's the claim that's being made, I would just request an opportunity to consider that and make a response on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions of council, from council?
Yeah, I want to, you may or may not be able to answer this, but this, this previous project in the box, did QE know I'm sure the design was out that they used to bid on the project. So didn't they know that going into the project when they bid on it?
They can see it, yes. They can look at a set of drawings and they can see what's there on paper. I would take some issue with the way Mr. Karkowski described the contractor's obligation to review the drawings and point out all discrepancies at the time of the bid. That's not exactly what the bidding documents and the contracts say. As a general rule, contractors are not responsible for design errors. So the answer is yes, they could look at that box, they could see how it was designed, but they don't have to take the next step, which is figure out if that design is actually feasible and doable and able to be performed as drawn at the time of bid. They didn't know that until they went to their supplier and said, here's the drawing, provide us a precast junction box that meets these specifications, and they said, we can't do that. My understanding is nobody can do that. The box was just too big.
So if I understand your argument right, you're not disputing the fact that the city, as part of its code, has the authority and the right to be able to discard irresponsible bidders. What you're questioning is whether this is justifiably a non-responsive bidder?
Yeah, that's right.
Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly right. The code allows, the purchasing procedures allows the city to, under certain circumstances, deem a contractor non-responsible. My point is that that has to be based on some amount of support, documentation, evidence that will withstand judicial review under the applicable standards, which are arbitrary and capricious and rational basis.
I don't want to interrupt you, but previous performance on a contract you feel is not, it doesn't fall within that category?
It can be. I think it can be, but one single contract without trying to gather other evidence of a contractor's performance involving basically a design issue where there was a dispute, in my mind, is not a good faith basis to deem a contractor not responsible such that they can't do any more work for a municipality.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Does staff wish to provide a response of some kind? Douglas, this will have a 5-minute time limit, so Nicole, whenever it gets working.
And I plan to, I'll be very quick. I might ask Rick to add some detail to this, but to the point of can previous work be deemed or considered in determining a bidder not being responsible, that is specifically called out, 110.5C12 subsection 4. Previous contracts is to be considered in determining a responsible bidder or not. So from our standpoint of making that judgment, it very much played heavily into that determination. I would just offer Rick the ability, if this idea, and I'll say this kind of was a crutch of an issue from the get-go that we had, was this idea of a designated design, where from Thomas and Hutton's perspective, and Rick can fill this in if he chooses, the design of these boxes was to be done by QE. QE, their subcontractors, that responsibility was placed on them, and we just sat at a stalemate for a year, 2 years, kind of waiting for QE to do the work that is required of them in a designated design project. So that, I mean, we're still here 5 years later, 4 years later, we still don't fully understand, embrace the concept of a designated design. And I might think that portions of this project are a designated design, that we might be going to the contractor and saying, this part of the project needs to be designed by you and your subcontractors. You present the design to us, we will authorize it or not authorize it. So again, that was a crux of the problem that we had throughout our experience, and I think it goes to show that we may still have a disconnect all these years later. Rick, if you want to come up and touch on that.
Quickly.
Yeah, I would just want to say, I take my profession very seriously, and a design error is very serious talk. I don't think anything, or anybody has, a design error hasn't been found. It was part of a disagreement. There's standing on both sides, but, we went around and around. We do these things all the time. On this island, a similar box was placed on this island, same, at the same design and everything. And so, again, it just came down to this one specific box became a big sticking issue. It was not a design error, is all I'm saying.
Rick, quick question. You're saying that we do have that box on the island somewhere, so it's not like it can't be
We have
done.
one that was like the same size, big one on this island.
So the claim that it couldn't be done or taken across the connector and all that.
That's correct.
You're disputing that?
Yep.
Other questions of staff? Nicole, we're done with the time limit, sorry. David, go ahead, sorry.
So it seems like a lot of this is about that one box design was a main sticking point. Is there similar type requirements under this new contract?
Yeah, there is a precast box or multiple boxes on the site. They're not, of course, to the same size and everything, but there is a precast boxes on this new job.
In the same, not design build, but what's your terminology? Designated design?
It is a designated design. It's a precast box. We don't show the design. It's a certain specification, size has to be provided, and it has to go to the precaster. Precaster has to design it and provide it.
David, did you get your question answered, or do you have a follow-up?
No, that was
Okay.
it. It was that specific type of work on this
On the
new
job.
project.
Thank you. Does the protester wish to provide a response?
Yes, sir,
All
very
right.
briefly.
And we'll have same 5-minute.
I'm sorry?
Same 5-minute limit on this piece.
Yes, that'll be fine. I won't need all that. Thank you. We're talking about this issue about delegated design or.
Designated.
Designated. I think it's actually delegated design. When you have a construction project and the engineer or the designer doesn't provide all of the details, sometimes the contractor is delegated the responsibility to provide the design through shop drawings or whatever else from their supplier. Sometimes they hire their own structural engineers to provide the design when it's very, very clearly set out that this particular component of the project has been delegated to the contractor. That's one of the issues here, right? And I think you heard Mr. Karkowski say it when he was describing this issue. And let me just say, I have a lot of experience with Thomas & Hutton. They are very professional. They are very good engineers. I don't know Mr. Karkowski personally. I don't want anything I've said here today to be taken to suggest that I don't think he's good at what he does. I know his firm, and I know that they are very good at what they do. What I'm saying is there was a dispute among the parties on this project about this issue about who had the design responsibility and whether or not the engineer was going to provide the additional information that was needed. And then to go back to the point I was making, if you heard Mr. Karkowski just a moment ago, the way he described it was, yes, there were these boxes that had to be provided according to certain specifications. And when you go to the supplier and you say, these are the specifications that this precast box has to meet, and they say that that can't be done, then you have to go back to the drawing board in terms of the specifications that come from the engineer and figure out how are we going to do that. Mr. Pierce asked the question about this second box. There were two boxes, JB1 and JB2, that were at issue on this prior project. JB2, that issue was resolved more easily because of the way the check valves and a bypass chute was designed into that system. I do not think it's true that there is another box on this island that is the same size as JB1 that was precast in a factory, put on a truck, and brought here and installed. And I don't have all those facts, but I think maybe that's what I heard before, and I would dispute that, but reserving the right to go back and look more closely at it, because I think that piece is significant. If there aren't any other
Follow-up
questions.
Question for council, from council. Ashley, sorry.
Yes, so just going back to the original, like, when you were going over the bid, whose responsibility was it to make sure that they could complete the project as it was being requested? And why was it not realized that the size was not going to work?
Because they hadn't yet gone to the supplier to say, here are the specifications that you have to build this to, and gotten the answer that it can't be done. And I think that the longer answer to that question goes back to this issue of what information was provided on the drawings, and whether or not the contractor, under the bid documents, has the responsibility of figuring out what we would call a design discrepancy in the plans. And the general rule on that is that contractors aren't designers, and they are not responsible for figuring out if there's a problem with something as designed. Their job is to build it as it's shown, and if it can't be done, then you go back to the designer and you try to figure it out.
I do have a question. If I'm responding to a bid or a proposal or something, I always ensure that I can deliver and find out that I can specify or deliver the product before I put a price or a term and condition to the bid. I think what you're telling me, what you're saying is that your firm didn't do that to take that step to find out if your firm could actually deliver what was in the specification? Is that what I'm hearing?
I don't know exactly the timing of all of that, or when they went to the supplier to get that answer. But
You
what I
would do
tell
that
you is-
usually during the bid process to find out from your subcontractor whether or not they can perform.
Well, and I hear what you're saying, and it sounds like you're a contractor, and maybe you have experience with doing it that way on your projects, but what I'm saying is the standard in the industry and the law does not require all of those things to be done at the time of bid. And what governs the relationship between the parties on that point is the bid documents, and Quality Enterprises was going by their obligations in the bid documents. And those are the types of details that are not required to be laid out at the time of bid, that you can't know. You can't always know all of those things at the time of bid. You can make reasonable assumptions, and a reasonable assumption can be made that if the engineer has designed this as a precast product that has to be made and shipped to the site, that it is doable.
How big was the actual box?
Boy, that's a great question. I do not know what the actual dimensions were. I mean, we can look at the drawings and figure it out.
Rick, do you know?
Something like 7 by 12 interior dimension.
Mayor, I've got one final question. Douglas had indicated that there were placeholder amounts on the bid package that was submitted that weren't properly vetted. Are you aware of those, what they may be?
I think what he's talking about is portions of the bid where Quality Enterprises is going to self-perform the work. And as I mentioned earlier, I mean, they're pre-qualified, pre-selected as a utility contractor to perform that work. And they put round numbers in there where they've estimated it based on their own internal staff and personnel. What you might be seeing from other bidders is contractors who have to go out, hire a sub to provide that work to them with all of their markups, which might explain why some of these other bids were so much higher than QE's bid. So without him specifying exactly which line items he's talking about there, I'm not 100% sure. But I think that those are the line items where they're self-performing.
Question.
Jimmy?
Has QE experienced this scrutiny before from any other customers?
I'm sorry, have they experienced?
The scrutiny that, about being the lowest responsible builder or bidder?
I apologize, I don't know what their history is on other projects and whether they've ever been deemed non-responsible before. I could get an answer to that question, but I don't know. They do a lot of government work, I know that.
Ashley?
Okay, this might not be a question for you, but just curious, if we had previously successfully gotten one of these boxes, why was there such a delay in having this be successful? I mean,
I think to get the full answer to that question, you would have to go back to the project files and look at the communications between Thomas and Hutton and QE about this issue. But I think a lot of it was because QE was taking the position that this part of the design was the responsibility of the engineer. The engineer was saying, it's not our responsibility, you have to provide the design, and those two parties could not come to agreement on how to solve that problem, and it took some time.
One more question. Can you attest that the QE has gone to all the subcontractors on this deliverable list to ensure that they can deliver what they've actually bid?
I can assure you that they will deliver what they've actually bid. I don't know the details of their bidding process, but I would tell you I would be surprised if any of the bidding contractors on this project went to the level of detail that I think you might be talking about. I don't know, but I would be surprised. But they submitted a bid, and they submitted a price, and their obligation under the law is to perform according to that unless there is a problem. And this prior project had a problem, and our position would be that's not a basis to disqualify them from all future work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, thank you.
So I'll ask for a motion to enter into executive session to receive legal advice concerning the protest of Quality Enterprises USA, Inc. and related contractual issues pursuant to South Carolina Code Section 30-4-70A2. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second.
So moved.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Off record at 4:47. So we'll excuse staff and guests and meet with our legal counsel.